This game is a tarnish to the Zelda series, and it needs to be destroyed.
Oh, holy shit. Wait, I just want to clarify. Are you and Neil both on the position of Majora's Mask in general, or the 3DS version that you've been playing / emulating?
I think 64 and 3DS both have their problems.
But if you had to save one.
If I had to save one,
Yeah.
does the 3DS version fix more things than it breaks? Ooh.
Well, I think maybe if you're going to take a second to think about it, I will say that as the Majora's Mask fanboy in the room, that I love Majora's Mask and have replayed that on my Nintendo 64 cartridge at least a couple times to completion. But I was unable to finish the 3DS version.
You're not bothered by the fact that if you want to get to a specific point in the time, you just have to either sit there or go to dusk or dawn?
No, I'm fine with that. And we're also talking about utilizing the Scarecrow songs, right, to slow down and speed up time.
Yeah.
Or I guess not even speed up. I always had time slowed, so I guess turning time to normal speed was considered speeding up for me.
Yeah. And then I guess like
us.
you get like a 2-hour speed up if you want, but it's like, okay, if you want to go to exactly like 1 hour in the 1 hour from now, you just have to wait there for
Yeah, it's approximately a minute or something. And yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm totally cool with that because as I got to play the game more and more, I could entertain myself with something else in the area normally while I was waiting for that time to happen. Or later when I played the game and I had a cell phone, I would just like text message somebody and wait, which is absolutely me devising a solution that the game should come up with. So I'd probably have to concede that point for the most part.
Then it's probably the Nintendo 64 version, yeah.
That's the one that you'd save.
Now it depends, like,
Some of these bosses are real bad.
yeah, it's the part where it's like, the bosses are a lot harder in that version, though. So it makes the boss fights even less enjoyable.
Well, okay, before we go any further, I'm Neil. I'm joined with Scott and Tiffany today.
That's right, no cookie.
We are talking about Majora's Mask because I just finished Majora's Mask on the 3DS we'll talk about the specifics here in a second. And, I was extremely excited to play, or at least I had the notion of being extremely excited before, because I've always heard people talk about how Majora's Mask is the best Zelda game.
Right.
I don't know if that opinion still sticks after Breath of the Wild's release, but prior to that, at least, this has always been the dark horse, but in a good way.
It's the cult
mare.
classic of the Zelda games. And I'd say what I think brings this then into the topic is that it is like immediately relevant to what you've been playing, and because it's so near and dear to my heart, it's always relevant to me.
And so instead of eating up potentially 45 minutes or something for a regular podcast, especially with E3 around, we figured we would do this episode just so we could put it to rest.
This is a special little bonus for everybody.
So let me start off by saying that I've spent a bit of time exploring some of the changes that Nintendo made to the 3DS version, but I'm not familiar with all of them, and we'll address those as they come up. And that I played the majority of the game on Citra, which is an emulator, but I spent enough time on the 3DS just to figure out like what differences there were, and if having a stylus as opposed to using my mouse for the touchscreen would really make that much of a difference. And overall, the emulated version is actually like near perfect, aside from some visual effects kind of slowing down the frame rate. Before I go any further, I did want to ask, aside from the time travel mechanics and like the inability to skip time, without going into the bosses, were there any other big things I missed out by not playing the 64 version of this game?
Yeah, absolutely. So, What's your favorite mask, Neil? Just out of curiosity. And I'm asking specifically your transformation masks.
Fierce
So
deity mask, baby.
let's cut that out.
Such a
Let's say that it's
cop-out
between
answer.
the three. Yeah, it is a cop-out answer, but I mean, if it's in the running, I might say I agree. Which transformation mask from Deku, Goron, Zora do you like the most? Both for like utility and just like if you're sitting in Clocktown, which one are you putting on?
Is the non-mask a thing?
That's not an option because we all know Bunny Hood is technically the
Right.
best.
I don't know. It's like it's all of them are painful in some way. I honestly feel like maybe the Zora one because I don't have
Yes.
to worry about falling in water.
Okay, so here is I'm very excited that you say that because the Zora mask is just incredibly disappointing in this game.
I think
Because-
I know where you're going with this.
Absolutely. I know Tiff knows where I'm going. They torched the swim speed with the Zora mask,
Yeah.
and it just feels clunky and awkward in the 3DS version. Neil, when you played the N64 version, although you had a much less like accurate and responsive controller with that like analog stick that had been whittled down by all the time you had played Ocarina of Time and other games, you got to at least swim through the water like a complete torpedo with the Zora mask in the first game.
And not
You
use
were-
magic.
Yeah, and not use magic, and you were able to essentially... The water physics were really good considering the era that this game was made in. You could essentially do like a dolphin splash out of the water, and when you got very talented at it, you could make like somewhat high jumps out of the water, landing onto platforms with it. And it was incredibly satisfying to do. And actually, it's at the point where they took that out of the game that I played probably half of the Great Bay and then gave up because I was so frustrated. Not specifically from them cutting the speed, but that definitely contributed to it. So
that's interesting because I feel as if going faster as a Zora, even if I had unlimited magic, or excuse me, if I didn't have to worry about the magic, may not have made it better for me because I was really turned off by the controls of the Zora, and going faster probably would have made me feel even more annoyed. I got used to it. I figured out I just had to treat the Zora swimming mechanic like I was a fucking airplane.
I found it harder to navigate the Zora swimming in the 3DS version than
I'm
I
gonna-
ever did with the N64.
I'm going to have to agree with him there. I think in the 3DS version, it controlled like absolute fucking garbage. The bit on the moon with the kids when you're going through the tunnels. I spent an hour trying to do the fucking dolphin jump out of the water. And then I think it was a depth perception problem because I just couldn't do it.
There's something that's intuitive about swimming at that speed. Like that speed seems natural and like more in line with what we expect out of the Zora as a race in the Zelda games. Like they live in the water and therefore should be strong, confident swimmers. And it feels like in the 3DS version, you're like more or less moving at doggy paddle speed the whole time in the water, which is it's very weird. And maybe Tiffany and I are experiencing a case where we're expecting a lot more acceleration or like velocity in our movement because we're used to a previous version of it. But it's a very weird feeling to play the game with that. And that's why I see where you guys are kind of trying to consider, is this 3DS remake really an improvement, or are some of the like fixes or changes that they made all that effective or even like relevant or necessary to making the game more enjoyable and bringing it into the modern age?
Are there any other changes between the 3DS and the original version?
I mean, they made the graphics prettier, and for a spooky game, the really macabre polygons.
What
are
makes
kinda
this game
lost.
spooky to you?
I don't know. I feel like this game just has a much darker, like, thematic tone than Ocarina of Time did. And Ocarina of Time had literally the second half of the game playing as adult Link in a world that had been corrupted by, like, Ganon taking control of the... I don't think he got the Triforce, but essentially Ganon imprisoning the royal family and, like, spreading his corruption around the land for 7 years.
I realize I don't know if I should be going in order of your docket or your thing, so
We'll get back on track in a second. So.
Okay. Sorry.
Neil's a good host. He can get us where we need to go.
Because I was about to jump somewhere else, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't.
I think that one of the things that Majora's Mask tackles thematically over some of the other games is that there is a very big emphasis on death in each point of the story. And whether we're talking about the death of Maiku from the Zora or the death of the Goron hero, I forget his name. Darmani, yeah. Or even the death of that Deku Butler's son. Every single area that we find ourselves in, we find ourselves face to face with death. And I'm sure people may have seen or read about the application of the stages of grief to the different areas in Termina. And though I don't think the theory is completely fleshed out, I think there is some fairness that each community is dealing with the death of someone or the loss of someone in one way or another in this game. And that's not necessarily as visible in other Zelda games. That's a more adult or mature tone than some other Zelda games really take.
I mean, I would say that it's maybe not even the communities, but specific characters for some of those deaths. Like Darmani, it's definitely the group of Gorons, but the Deku Shrub is really only spoken of with the butler. They're dealing with.
Yeah, but in that case, it's the princess who is lost and presumed potentially dead or kidnapped.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that. But that's before we start getting into very specific points of Majora's Mask, I want to talk about the unique and interesting concepts that it presents, but I find executes just short of an idealized use. Specifically, what this game focuses on is the ability to jump back to the start of your 3 days that this game takes place over. The time travel. In general, the idea of re-experiencing these 3 days of groundhogging it up, so to speak. It's interesting, and it's a good centerpiece for the game to come around. But I think my first issue just is how the game handles time travel in a way that they how they handle the continuity and the, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially, how objects, items, and equipment are handled in this mechanic. Why are there certain items, unique items like deeds, that you lose when you don't lose a hook shot or a bow, or apparently the ability to buy, which this is weird, but the idea of being able to buy that giant Goron bomb, the powder keg, basically.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I actually did not have an answer when you first posed this, but luckily, since I had a chance to look at the list and it dawned upon me now, I can't think of an instance in which any of those items that you lose are items that you acquire through, say, a dungeon or something. All of the items that you seem to retain are unique items, non-expendable, like bombs, bomb chews, arrows, things like that.
But you also
that you get from treasure chests and dungeons. While all these other items that you're mentioning were either originally possessed by characters at the start of day one, and therefore it's going to be kind of bullshit to try and figure this out.
It's totally bullshit
way,
because you go and buy the bomb bag, the large bomb bag, and when you reverse time, you still have the large bomb bag that ends up getting stolen, assuming you don't intervene, by a thief on night one. You go and buy the razor sword or get your sword upgraded, but if you go back in time, it reverts back to your plain sword. But apparently a sword, once it's adorned with gold, becomes impervious to time travel. It cuts through time, I think, as they put it. And which leads me to the question of how the fuck are these great fairies affected by time and not the glass bottles? Glass bottles of which you can get through very ordinary means as well. These are not magic glass bottles, or apparently they are. Maybe they're also laced with gold.
Yeah, it's the gold stopper.
I'm pretty sure the theory we talked about is the correct theory. Those are the only items that can fit up his ass. So,
So the bottles are like, what are those dolls called? That collapse into-
Matoroshika, the nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls, yeah. So the bottles are nesting dolls. Each bottle fits within the other bottle.
Mm.
And then everything that he can fit, like the hook shot and stuff, into those bottles then goes up his ass. But you don't want to ingest potions and milk up your ass as well. So that's
So he
why
has to pour it out.
empty 'em. Arrows are also dangerous, but the bow is okay.
Yeah.
Another of my issues is that the game goes to great lengths to give you like a journal that chronicles all of these people's schedules, problems, and other sorts of events. And a lot of the times you're encountering these characters after these events have occurred. I'm not going to go into details too much here because I'll be talking about it when we talk about story. But ultimately, there are no quests that retain a permanent resolution when you go back in time. With the exception of like when you kill bosses, you can then confront the bosses without having to go through the dungeon. I'm assuming that was also the case in Majora's Mask on the N64.
It was.
So that means when I go and help someone, I save their dog from getting ran over by a wagon. I've saved that dog once, but I'm not going to save that dog again in any other timeline.
Why did you choose a wagon?
I don't know. A wagon, am I going to say
Are we
a
choosing
car?
in the Zelda? Oh, or you're role-playing in the Zelda universe. Okay.
Yeah. So my whole thing is it's like, it makes me feel like this weird like inconsistency with Link's character, or maybe lack of character, because Link is usually like a doer of good and justice, and it seems like he's perfectly fine with utilizing or like helping people when he gets something in return and allows him to continue on, but then basically can just forget about them otherwise. Like, I saved the dog once to get the magic bottle, and now I can let the dog die every other time because I have the magic bottle that fits up my ass.
Yeah, but I mean, stopping an apocalypse is technically the biggest favor you can do for
But that
anybody.
dog still dies at the end of the 3 days.
At least within the theory, like within our theory.
But the dog's loved ones might make it out. Like, he's being utilitarian. He's not being morally corrupt here.
Well, so while we're talking about the dog that would allegedly die, it seems to me that like the dawn of day 4, which is the ending of the game, assuming you don't end the game by quitting and never playing again, the Skull Kid returns to normal. So that means the events from 1 to 3 happen as they transpired. Like, the problems happen. The Skull Kid did the shit to cause the mischief, and all the mini quests that you encounter in the game, like, those things had to have happened. Yet by day 4, it seems like everything gets resolved. So I'm just like asking the question of like, how did these resolutions happen? Does Link solve every problem off camera during the final iteration of day 3? Because it seems like there are literally quests that you cannot complete. Quests that you cannot complete if you want to go down another quest or do another quest. Like the
There's only 3 quests, so it's...
well,
There's
yeah.
really only 3 main big quests.
But I'm talking about some of the small things too, like
the bomb bag,
You can't save Romani's ranch and do like
the cafe,
some-
Kefka,
yeah,
whatever.
doing cafe and whatever the other lady's name's quest is.
Anju.
Like, Anju and cafe. Like, there are a couple that the timing is, if not mutually exclusive, so tightly wound together that it seems infeasible to really tackle both.
And the game doesn't make any effort to actually describe how it happens or how anything works out. Is this a power of the ocarina that allows like Link to off camera do everything in completely frozen time? Or has Majora's Mask like after it's relinquished all of its evil power, basically sewn together all of these different timelines or actions into one, basically leading to this idealized ending where you could talk to Romani and Romani would say, "Oh yeah, I hung out with Link on day like night 1," but then you could go and talk to Cafe and say that, "Oh yeah, I was hanging out with Link on the night of day 1 as well." Like that seems like the only feasible thing, but it's like I guess it's not like a big deal that it's never explained in detail, but it just just feels like a complete cop out. Like there's no actual sacrifice by the end of the game, resulting in essentially a story that, aside from Darmani, the Deku Scrub, and the dead Zora, there's really no casualties and everything turns out perfectly fine and dandy. Like there's really actually no sacrifice to the story. Like, what do we really have to care about Darmani?
And none of those characters actually die because it's all a dream.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother thing too, right? Like if we ignore the whole current canon that this is all like the Skull Kids' imagination / dream run rampant.
I mean, that's the only way it makes sense that the bank somehow has magical powers to retain your money over time.
The bank is gold. It holds gold. And obviously, gold
Therefore, it's immune.
Passes through time.
Okay.
It's like I expect something of a narrative journey that has like a climax, a resolution, everything that you would want from a satisfying story. But at the end of it, the sacrifices that are made to get to the end, to your final resolution, your final standpoint, don't matter at all to us as players, because these characters were already dead by the time we started playing the game. Like there's no sacrifice, there's no personal there's no personal trauma to conquer or anything. It just doesn't feel really rewarding to me in that regard. Yeah, while we're on the subject of stories in general, it seems like the most interesting plot in the game is centered around things that the game doesn't want to talk about either. Like Romani and Cremia's plotline is more interesting to me. The Anju Cafe marriage quest line, that's more interesting to me. The identity of the fucking masked salesman is more interesting to me. But the story or the game is way more dedicated to telling the story of these giant ass fucking nosed guardians or gods and their straw skeleton friend Skull Kid.
Right, it's hard to find them as particularly interesting subjects.
Why are these giant noses fucking Tiffany, you were saying that they were like actually a reference to
an ancient civilization. There is no actual confirmed proof on it.
I don't know what this is, Tiff.
That's just, there's no definitive proof. It's never been confirmed. That's just what's it's believed.
Majora.
Majora.
Which is similar to Majora.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm going to throw in a little bit of a defense for why we find ourselves in the middle of a game that has a really cool mechanic that makes no sense in the lore whatsoever. And I think the best thing to reference is if you look at some like old Shigeru Miyamoto quotes, there's a lot of philosophy, it seems, within Nintendo, especially when they were making games early on, that the ultimate approach was to make something fun before they fleshed any of it out with like story and characters and whatnot. They wanted to approach making games by having some sort of task or action that's happening and trying to frame that in a fun way. And so I have a pretty good feeling that for Majora's Mask, very similar to Ocarina of Time, in Ocarina of Time, they wanted to have a young Link, adult Link mechanic, and so they build the time travel story around that. In the same sense, with Majora's Mask in order to make this time, like a further extension of a time travel mechanic, work into the game. They probably had to warp the story around it, and ultimately, in order to make a functional game with these unique items and whatnot, they had to have a plot that was not going to be able to they had to have a narrative that wasn't going to necessarily fill all the holes or questions that we have about the retention of some items over others and whatnot. I think these were all mechanical choices that unfortunately are not easy to explain at all, besides the gold theory.
Maybe the most the next step to take is probably just talking about how the game chose to be difficult, how it designed its dungeons and bosses. Because like at its heart, like Zelda is dungeon crawling or dungeon exploration, boss battles, repeat, final
and character
dungeon
interactions.
and boss battle. Yeah, character interactions, but with and
Is it really character interactions?
It's character writing. It's more like
I mean, I don't know if I'd say that. OG Zelda was not. It was.
that's true. OG Zelda didn't have almost any characters at all.
and even Link to the Past,
may
it's
have-
like very surface level text. It literally is just telling you what you can do or what you should do next.
But we're talking about a game that's standing on the shoulders of Ocarina of Time, which had a lot of very unique characters. And, you know, a lot of... It's one of the first games in which there are a lot of characters to talk to that have information or things to say that may not be immediately relevant or necessary to the story.
I'm going to argue here that Ocarina doesn't have that interesting of characters, like NPCs, and Majora's are more interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. I'm thinking Majora's is essentially investing more into that than Ocarina did, but I think Ocarina set the groundwork. And even before that, I guess there were some weird or odd or funny moments that were supposed to happen with characters in other games. Like, we have the guy who's just guarding a sign in Link to the Past. Like, they've made funny or interesting characters, but unfortunately in that particular medium with that hardware at the time, they can have maybe two different like cycles of dialogue available to them for the most part. I think Ocarina started designing more interesting characters. They started making characters that were pretty unique in their character design and may have some interesting lines or two. Mm-hmm. And with the like side quests making a little bit more of an appearance in like Ocarina, where you're working for the Happy Mask salesman and having a bunch of interactions to get it's the Mask of Truth, I think, is the final one in that game that you can actually utilize to talk to the stones. Mm-hmm. Elements like that, I think, definitely demonstrate that the Zelda games from Ocarina on did start to follow a little bit more of a main storyline or main quest line dichotomy and a like exploration and interaction with characters and other like ancillary or auxiliary mechanics and forms of entertainment in the game.
Yeah,
definitely.
It definitely started to embrace like a narrative RPG style in terms of its town and NPC interaction. And Majora's Mask does do a better job with its cast, I think. Like the personality is definitely there in Ocarina, but it seems like every character, almost every single NPC in Majora's Mask is memorable, so I have to give it credit to that.
They seem to take character types that they had either not used before or previously used and just dial it up, in my opinion.
I will say that what the game does very poorly is expand upon the dungeon design that Ocarina starts with. And when I played Ocarina, I think I was pretty hesitant in giving a pass to it, but it's the reality of looking at a game and thinking to yourself, like, this is the first or one of the first three-dimensional dungeon-style like adventure games. So you have to kind of get around the whole like mechanic or quote-unquote puzzle of having to get through a room by looking around to find new anchor points, eyeballs, or crystal switches. And at points, Majora's Mask does improve upon some of those things. Like, now it's timed, and now you need to find the most correct route to get through this door before it closes, etc., etc. But it just it bugs me because the water temple, which is in Ocarina of Time, which is notorious for being a it's something that the director, I'm gonna fuck up this name, but Aonuma-san, I believe it's Eiji Aonuma.
It's Eiji Aonuma, yeah.
He apologized for the water temple, and yet,
which he shouldn't.
Yeah, he shouldn't.
I honestly don't think he should either. I thought the water temple was fine, especially after playing Majora's Mask, by the way, because
are you comparing it to the other water temple?
I'm comparing it to all of the dungeons except the first one. So What makes me so annoyed with this particular game is that the dungeons rely on such a heavy use of switching between masks and tools. Like, switching between tools was always kind of a bummer in Ocarina, and even Link to the Past, especially Link to the Past, because you only had one menu or one slot. And this also applies to Link's Awakening. But the menus, like, bringing up your menu is not as obtrusive in those games because it's a two-dimensional, no-load type game, right?
If you don't want to have a sword in Link's Awakening, you could technically go gutsy.
You're right. And I think there were actually times where I used the boomerang and
the feather or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool, by the way. It's great that you can actually unassign your sword item, and that maybe would have made it a little more enjoyable or tolerable in this game, because having to not only switch between all of your tools, they do make you use your masks as well, and you have to admit that, like, one of those slots is usually going to be the bunny hood or whatever, because it's just like, if you want to get to point A as fast as you can because you've gone through this dungeon already, because you have to collect all the fucking missing fairies, like, you want to go fast.
And that's sort of another downfall of the 3DS version, because instead of having 4 buttons, you have 2 buttons and then the touchscreen buttons.
Right.
So you have just basically 2 buttons again. You're back to a 2D Zelda.
I think you only had 3 buttons. The left.
You only have 3. The top of the C buttons was for
that's right. That's right.
your
Navi
viewing.
or whatever her name is. I forgot.
Yeah.
Tattle.
Oh, yeah, for Tattle. That's right.
Fuck Tattle.
Not as bad as Navi.
I don't know.
I'll take Tattle over Navi.
I don't know. They're both.
You don't like a little bit of sass?
No, you know what? I was really happy I didn't have to hear listen all the time. But does Tattle even say anything?
No.
Tattle
she just makes
dings.
noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That fucking dinging sound's also pretty annoying. So, in addition to that, you also
they're actually bleeping out the expletives on Tattle.
So along with the tools and masks, you also end up mixing in the ocarina or instrument, depending on what form you're in. Which, if we're getting very specific, the Stone Tower Temple is quite literally the bane of my existence, because the number of fucking times, and not just the temple, but the lead up to it, the number of times I had to hit Y, X, Y, R, Y, A, X multiple times to set up the same 3 separate fucking statues, which also meant switching between masks. Like, that was bad design.
A lot of wasted time.
It sort of is a waste of time.
No, it's not just sort of a waste of time. And let's get on, like, the very specific level of when you play a song, it has to repeat the song back to you. What makes it even more infuriating on this, as a side note, is that all of the new songs in this game aren't really even songs, with the exception of the giant song, which is shit anyways.
Song of Storms. Oh, you said the new song. Sorry.
Right. So like, all of the songs that were not in Ocarina do not actually have proper song forms that are at least enjoyable to listen to. Like RYAX. That song sounds stupid as shit.
I don't recognize any of these because they're not with C buttons, so I am totally lost.
Oh, so this would be the song that creates dummies after you beat the undead
That's
king
the
thing?
Elegy of Emptiness.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. That...
You could just use the names instead of the button presses.
You know, I don't even know him because I've just hit him so many fucking times.
I remember when he started the dungeon, he's like, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to remember this. I'm going to have to look at it every time." I'm like, "No, that's not true at all."
Yeah. Okay, and I don't know if there are any people who can argue with you on that case, Neil. It's annoying when there's 3 slots to use. I can only imagine using the DS.
But there are 4 slots in total when you're on the
emulator.
DS, so maybe that's an upside. I'm not sure.
Are there? Yeah, I guess I don't know.
But at the same time, it's like you have 2 R's and 2 L's. Why are the R's and L's always mapped to the same thing? Like that feels like a lost opportunity, and not just for Majora's Mask on 3DS, but like for a lot of games, they never actually distinguish a difference between R1 and R2 and L1 and L2.
Wait, is there an R1, R2, L1, L2?
Yep.
It is like the least used feature on the 3DS. You have separate buttons back there.
Ooh, no, I don't think that's the case for the original 3DS. You must have one of the newer 3DSs.
I can check with my older DS.
maybe.
Because I have the old 3DS XL.
Tiff's grabbing her 3DS,
Okay.
which is a standard one.
Yeah, I have
is the
the
case
Link
with
to
the
Another
LDS,
World
it's not true.
3DS, and that
Or
one
it is true. It does not have to.
only has L and R.
Holy crap!
So that's why.
The new 3DS is extremely superior.
So why do they even make that change when like the majority
When
of your
they're not gonna
hardware is
use
not
it.
going to support that or software?
Oh,
That's why a lot of games say supported only by new 3DS.
Okay. Before I let us go any further, though, I wanted to point out that this was an issue with Ocarina, but every time you perform a song, you also have to play it as fast as you can, and then Link is going to play it at the regular tempo.
at the tempo, yeah.
Which, at least talking about the Wind Waker remake or remaster on Wii U, when you conducted a song after you'd done it the first time, it doesn't have to repeat it back to you. It just does it, and you're good to go. Like, it's just a simple thing that, again, I'm more willing to forgive because Ocarina came first, but just to have the immediate game afterwards not fix the thing that bugs the shit out of me in Ocarina and make it worse because of the excessive use of the Ocarina or whatever instrument. Damn, man. Stone Tower Temple was like the blight of my existence.
And that's just a shame because I said it a couple times to you during playing it, but it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it's a super cool idea. There's so many good ideas in this game. Like the whole rotating gears within the water temple. What is it in this one? A waterhead or a snowhead?
Right.
No.
Oh, the Snowhead's
No, Snowhead's the ice and snow.
That's
Goron.
right.
it's Great Bay Temple.
Great Bay Temple. That you look at that and then you look at Breath of the Wild and you're like, oh, there's some connection here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the complete difference in how well it's executed. And while we're talking about like annoying things going through these dungeons, how many
Mini
times do I have to
bosses.
fight that illusion wizard?
He's so easy, though. I just hated the frog, personally.
But that's the thing. The number of times you have to fight him, it's not even fun after you go through him the second time, third time. It's just another instance where the game does not respect your time.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I mean, Zelda seems to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, it's one thing to have an annoying mini boss and say, wow, that was bad design. That wasn't a very fun fight, or it was annoying for whatever reason. In my case, I think primarily I disliked the frog because I just had a hard time dealing with the the mount if I wasn't lucky enough to get close to a flower the first time, and then he rides a slime the second time. There was something annoying about not being able to finish the fight fast enough with the mechanics available, and to just have to do it again when they have either more health or just a slightly more difficult gimmick is really frustrating. especially when they're just using these mini bosses as excuses for the Donjuro mask. Or I guess it's Gero, in Japanese. Like that's the only reason they implemented those frog bosses is so you can use the frogs later to get a heart piece. And is it really worth it?
No.
Never.
I only had one row of hearts complete, plus one.
So
by the end of this game.
There's only one unique mini boss then, right? Which is the eye, which is a callback to an old boss from Link to the Past.
Isn't the Stone Temple boss the bat boss, a mini boss?
I don't remember that one.
He
at
has
all.
the scythe, and you have to shoot a light arrow at him to get the bats surrounding him away.
Oh yeah, that's right. No, that's a fair boss fight too. But there we go. We have 2 out of I think 4 available boss fights that were.
What was that, a vampire then, or I don't even remember. I just remember that fight being like, it was just about there in terms of coolness, because you don't get a whole lot of humanoid enemies in this game.
Yeah.
Humanoid enemy bosses in this game. But I ended up doing something that I am assuming is just fucking abusive, in that I would use the Zora barrier or shield to kill the bats as the person came around me to get more magic. And more hearts.
Both, I think.
Yeah, hearts and
they
magic.
probably drop both.
And then just thinking to myself that, like, I otherwise just treated that like a DPS race, because the guy doesn't give you any time. Like, the guy doesn't back off at all, which is really weird, because the majority of Zelda mini bosses and enemies in general like to play the whole, like, it's essentially turn-based combat, if you will, where it attacks you, then it gets off of you and gives you some time to recuperate, then it goes in. It's a very systematic thing. But this thing just keeps chasing you with its scythe. It literally gives you no time to recover. So you may as well just take out your sword and fucking deal as much damage as you can, switch into Zora and barrier whenever he is about to attack you, and get those bats for HP and magic. And I don't know. It's at least more interesting than some of the boss battles in the 3DS version. That's what I'd say. And on that topic, the first boss battle, Odowa, the tribal warrior from the swamp.
Odawolda? Yeah.
Odawola? Is that
maybe,
what it is?
Maybe. Oh, no. I might be wrong. It's been a while.
You know what? Shimomola. It doesn't matter.
It is Odowa. Okay.
From what I've gathered, he's a much bigger threat on the 64, so it's kind of a bummer that I didn't get to witness it. On the 3DS version, while I had to fumble around a bunch because I just didn't know what to do with all the environmental items around, so giving me misleading hints. All you really needed to do is drop Deku Nuts on him. That would knock him off balance and then expose his Majora eye, which I don't know if we talked about it while we were recording, but it sounds like every boss has been redesigned with the Majora eye becoming an exposed weakness.
Which I'm not sure I'm a big fan of. Because it seems like it's only a mechanism in which to like call out to the maybe like corruption or influence that the Majora's Mask is having on these giants. But that's it. Like, and they're already labeled by that due to, them having their masks, and additionally those masks being referenced again in the final fight against the Majora's Mask as they occupy the room. And attack you just in mask form. It seemed weird and unnecessary to tack on. It also, watching the fights, did change some of the mechanics to how those fights actually developed and went. Primarily, when we get to it, we can talk about Twin Mold and how different that fight is.
Oof.
All the boss fights are pretty different.
Well, so let's talk about Goat, the Bull and Snowhead Temple, which, again, you guys will have to lead me on the differences, but from what I experienced, it's basically you're on a circular track, you get to ride around as a Goron, collect your top speed to become to turn into your spiked mode, and then you hit the bull over to knock it over and expose the eye weak point. The problem here comes mostly from so there are two problems, I'd say. The first one is that much like the rest of the bosses, Odola is an exception because I just don't know how dangerous he would have been otherwise. These bosses aren't killing dangers. Like they're not going to just one hit you or unexpectedly kill you like off of a couple hearts and whatnot. Instead, they're stacked defensively. So with Go, if I do end up getting knocked low in health based off of all of the like falling debris, the spiked appendages, his electric or his lightning bolt, there are red pots and green pots around. It's literally just how long is it going to take for me to kill this boss?
They allow you to disengage, I think, is the most important thing to note. Like, if you want to recover, you can just not follow Goat around the track and take the gap that it takes him to make the lap to deal with restoring health or anything that you need.
Which I just don't necessarily think that's a smart design because it's like...
There's no pressure. There's no pressure.
And Odola is threatening to kill you, whereas Goat just seems to be running around in a circle. Like, what the fuck is his purpose? What is he doing? Like, not only is there no kill pressure, it feels like you're just killing a thing that doesn't necessarily mean you harm and is only defending itself. But where you might not have the killing intent originally, when you start actually playing or fighting this boss, the like all of the obstacles I was bringing up, at times it just feels like you will be unlucky when you're trying to knock into him. Like, well, I'm in my spiked form. I am one jump away from hitting him and knocking him over, and suddenly just a rock or a stalactite just drops on top of me.
Intercepts you, yeah.
Or like the static electricity or whatever that goes off of his body at random will shock me just before I hit his body. Or a lightning bolt just happens to hit me when I'm ramping up to speed and getting closer to him. It just further delays the battle, and that working with the time mechanic, it's the most annoying thing you can have when you're so close to intercepting him on multiple occasions, only to be stopped out of an unlucky thing that you would otherwise have no other control to dodge. And the thing is, if you dodge too far and you lose enough speed, you'll lose your spiked form, which means you just have to gather up more speed. Like, it's not fun.
So I'm going to make a quick comment about this boss for the 64 version. This boss is extremely exploitable.
Yeah.
You sit in a corner and you shoot arrows at it when it's shooting lightnings at you, and then it just dies.
Yeah, and instead of having the eyeball come out, if you knock Goat down, which you will, you can either transform out of your mask and just start slashing him, or do whatever else you want to do damage, because he's just kind of like tripped on the ground, and you don't have to. I don't know. I guess you probably have to shoot the eyeball in your version, right?
Either shoot or slash it. Depends on how much time you have.
Okay, I didn't know if you had the reach to get to it, but yeah, that's actually the fight that looks like it's the most similar, is the Odola, sorry, bad habit, and the Goat fights. Like, the other two are substantially different, it looks like, from the videos I've seen. But
I believe Odola in the DS version doesn't have his fire attack, doesn't have as many bug attacks.
Oh, yeah.
And there was one other thing.
He does definitely utilize a sort of like ring of fire attack and drops a lot of bugs from the ceiling in the N64 version.
Which
and I don't remember
apparently,
that coming up as often.
If you're the Deku Scrub,
there poisonous
apparently
mobs?
those bugs don't even bother you.
You, if you spin, you stun the bugs, and of course, popping out of the flower will kill them too. So they're a minor nuisance.
Okay, yeah, I don't think there are bugs because
there are poisonous moths too that float near you.
Not just moths.
Damage.
They don't just ruin your clothes, but they also poison your clothes. No, because moths will eat away at your cottons and linens. Yeah. Come on. Now, the third boss, Georg.
George.
Georg. We can all take a different approach. The big fish seems. First off, he got a really different work on his art. It looks like he has an armored head in the 3DS version and a different colored body and whatnot. Georg is just a big red stripy fish in the in the original game. And did he, during any point in time during the fight, release smaller fishes?
Lots of them.
Yes, lots.
Okay, yeah, that was the one thing that I wanted to confirm, because when I was watching the video, I wasn't sure if I necessarily saw any fishes in the 3DS version.
So does the boss in the 64 version have two stages, one where you're on land and one where you're under?
No, you're still on the platform over the large pool of water, and Georg is ultimately either ramming the platform to knock you into the water, or Georg is jumping over the platform, or essentially sliding across it with his sharpened scales to do damage and knock you into the water. Either way, Georg is trying to get you into the water. The thing that I find kind of to Georg's disadvantage in the N64 version is you swim quite fast as the Zora, and if you have a substantial amount of magic, you can just use the electrical barrier and swim at or near him. And I think you can also engage it to get him to stop from chewing on you if you're in the water. I don't know if those techniques necessarily persist in the 3DS version as well.
Upon testing, when you're in the mandatory underwater segment, no, charging him with the barrier up does not stop him from eating you in this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is. That's the other thing. If there's a mandatory water portion for you, I think what you could say is Georg is completely defeatable from being shot with arrows if you're on the platform when you do enough damage to stun him, or if you do stun him. But ultimately, you don't have to set foot in the water, though it may be more expedient to do so in most cases. But there's no stage 2 to the fight, really.
Okay.
Georg just releases the fish for part 2 to make it harder to scrap with him in the water.
Wait, when he releases the fish, you're still assumedly on the platform if you're playing it that way. Do the fish in the water actually do anything if you're still on land?
They don't do anything if you're on the platform.
Okay, so it's basically just it incentivizes players who are on the platform to stay out of the water, because otherwise they have to deal with all those piranhas or whatever.
Yeah.
My biggest beef here, the first form in the 3DS version is, when Link is on the platform. It seems kind of lackluster as a whole, because there's only one attack the boss has at this point, and that's just jumping across the platform. I don't know if there's any other way the enemy or the Georg could deal damage to you. And so that's really framed and easy enough to dodge. When you get underwater, that is where the boss proper feels like it starts. The player can deal damage in the Zora form using the boomerang blades, I guess you can call them. But the intended purpose is to release the mines scattered about in the pool of water and get Georg to try and suck you in at that specific point in time. Oh, whoops. I put Zelda instead of Link. Yeah. So if you release a mine close enough to Georg when he does the inhale, he inhales the mine and then blows up, and you have to do that 3 or 4 times. So that part seems completely different from what you did. There were no mines, I take it, correct?
No, there's nothing of the sort.
Okay. I think in theory it sounds fine. The problem is, as Georg swims around the arena, he's constantly blowing up mines, which doesn't harm him. And that just means that you have to basically luck out for Georg to stop someplace by a mine that is in front of him and not too close to endanger yourself from getting sucked in as you're trying to release the mine. So it becomes another waiting game, and if you're patient, there's no kill pressure, again, because with the Zora, you're going to use its force field against all of the monster ads, all the boss ads, and in doing so, you're going to get more resources like green potions or mana magic potions. So there's no penalty to playing defensively. And I guess if there are no further comments, we can talk about Twin Mold, which I think is maybe the worst boss fight I have ever played in a Zelda game.
Yeah, the worst Zelda boss.
Especially since there have been multiple... the Zelda game has played both with the fighting two opponents at once in a boss fight. Previously to that, there was Twin Rova, who also used the fire and ice kind of thematic mechanic. But also Twin Mold, or a version of Twin Mold, has existed since... I mean, the earliest I can think of it is Link to the Past, but maybe even before that, there might be a boss like that.
Two bosses in Ocarina of Time. They did it right before this, too.
Yeah. So ultimately, Twin Mold is a boring concept that keeps being reused by the Zelda franchise. They also do another Twin Mold style boss for the Earth Temple in Wind Waker, except it's just one large stingray that kind of operates like Twin Mold. But this is one of those very annoying and frequently occurring boss types in the Zelda franchise.
So I want to confirm with you, when you become a giant, since you get the mask before the boss fight in the 64 version, when you're a giant, you still have access to your sword and your tools,
your shield.
Correct?
I don't think you get your tools, but your sword and your shield are fair game. They grow with you when you use the giant's mask. And so the fight with Twin Mold is great because you still start out being small Link and these two massive creatures come out of the ground. And you haven't been able to use the giant's mask yet, but it's sort of the smoking gun effect that in a certain room you'll be able to use this mask. So you try it on and you get the cutscene where Link essentially just bursts into a large size. And all of a sudden it becomes a much fairer fight with you standing right at, sword hacking height on these two twin worms that are rotating around the sandy arena. But then it ultimately just evolves into a hack and slash then, trying not to take damage with your shield up and moving around and then slashing at Twin Mold's face and tail.
I think I would have preferred that over what happens in the 3DS version. Now,
it looks much harder to do damage in the 3DS version.
So to begin with, you don't have the giant's mask immediately, so what you end up doing is using your bow and arrow to take out the blue one, which has open eye targets, if you will, on its underside as it flies around and over you. It's also drastically slower compared to the red Twin Mold, or individual mold, I guess. But after you defeat that one, the chest will spawn on the platform. You'll go open it up, and it's the giant's mask. You put it on, you become Giant Link. The difference here is that you no longer have your sword or shield, and Link apparently cannot do jabs or punches. Instead, he must do right and left hooks and Hulk smashes. So what really makes this boss battle the worst experience I've ever had is that they don't change the hitbox on the Twin Mold. So it's like if you were still in miniature Link, if you shoot an arrow, it has to hit the physical characteristics or the shape of the Twin Mold to actually commit damage, right? Sounds reasonable. But for Link, when he grows to the size of Twin Mold or whatever, where the Twin Mold is now essentially just a large snake compared to Link as opposed to a ginormous monster, Link's hitbox retains the same proportions that it had as the small Link version. So the hitbox now is dramatically, larger, as large as the giant Link.
But it's shortened too because you don't have your sword, I'm going to assume.
Well, exactly. So his hitbox, meaning like the area where Link will take damage if collided with, is still at its regular proportion. I mean, you could say that like Twin Mold shrunk effectively in this case too, either or.
Mm-hmm.
But his attack range is dramatically shortened because you no longer have a sword. And instead, these swings barely, like, from a gamer's perspective, a player's perspective, it feels like your attacks barely get past your own hitbox. So you have to put yourself in very close quarters combat to even attempt to deal damage to the Twin Mold. The problem here is that the Twin Mold is such a fast enemy, not like dramatically fast, but such a fast enemy, and your own rolls and dodges have been reduced to like baby steps. You feel low mobility with low range. It's just not rewarding at all to fight. Couple that with the fact that Twin Mold will also regenerate health when it dives back into the ground, makes this the biggest time suck in the world. Oh man, it's so bad. I was so ready to rage quit. If I had not killed this boss, I probably would have just quit the game.
And
So in order to figure... Oh, sorry, Tiffany,
no,
you
go ahead. No, it's okay.
Okay, I'll make this quick. In order to understand these boss fights that you're talking about, I watched a video of someone who ran through all the boss fights of the 3DS game, and I think their video lasted 25 minutes. And the Twin Mold portion must have been 15 of those 25 minutes. Because I kept skipping through thinking, like, okay, when does the next notable thing happen? So I'm aware of it. And I watched this guy just whiff on punches over and over and over again. And all I could think about is, like, it does look menacingly frustrating. When swinging your sword obviously felt a lot more fair and familiar. That might be the other thing, too, is that, like, swinging those shitty punches in that Hulk smash doesn't look familiar to any other sort of motions that you commit in the game. And so you're also learning a brand new, like, combo with a really poor, like, reward or leeway on its actual range, all in the middle of a boss fight that is already kind of scaled to not be against your favor, but it's certainly annoying at best.
It just felt to me that like this illustrated the exact opposite of what boss design has always been in not just Zelda games, but in action games in general. Boss fights involve different stages of bosses, whether they get more moves or transform or anything like that, but the difficulty ramps up in a way that feels significant, but the player usually keeps their power, the tools at their disposal. It feels like they are in as much control as they were in the last form. And with the exception, like with very rare exceptions, does a player end up feeling weaker or less capable in like later boss stages or forms. But this game ends up basically making you feel like you've been castrated by turning you into a giant because you're no longer mobile, you no longer have range, yet you're also seemingly, I guess, like at a disadvantage because now Giant Link is taking up half of your screen at any given point in time and feels like he's getting hit more frequently and more easily because his hitbox is not nearly as nuanced as this enemy that he's fighting.
So, sorry. I feel that this particular game does it a lot, or maybe I'm just bad, I don't know. But for this particular boss, they never tell you it, but for the 3DS version, if you fucking smash your analog stick in a circle really fast and do it all 3 times, you will have 1 less takedown to do. And so instead of 4, you will only have to do 3.
And you're speaking specifically when you hit the monster down.
Yes.
So it's on the ground and you have to spin it around, correct?
Yes. Of course, if you're bad and he just goes inside too many times, regenerates health.
Yeah, did I have to do it 4 times?
You had to do it 4 times.
And you said you had to do it 5 times, right?
I believe so. I might be wrong.
It's like infuriating. Like,
Yeah, no, it'd be really satisfying if you slapped him down once, the eyeball came out, and then that was it. Like,
I
that
don't
would be
think
a
that's
cool
possible,
moment.
but
Oh, what I'm saying is that
If it
you
had.
expose the vulnerability and then you're able to exploit it the rest of the time without having to do that like spinning slap cinematic again. Like I think that would be a cool moment that would stick with the player and make this a much more enjoyable experience. Like I turned into a giant Link. My moveset was super shitty, but once I wrestled it to the ground and exposed its eye, we were able to have like a tussle. And then it could just make you focus on targeting the head to get to the eyeball. Like,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm fine with leaving my argument there. I'd like to hear what you have.
But it's like, why not inform the player about that? And 1 less takedown is a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's, like I said, unless I happen to miss that, and same with your playthrough when we played it.
Yeah, no, I don't think we caught anything from it. Unless, like, maybe this is one of those times where Tattle would have told you something useful. But you're just...
They could easily demonstrate it by, showing the analog stick rotating during that scene. There are plenty of games that do that. When they want you to do something, they give you just a very simple prompt that you can follow.
And Zelda's not, like, the Zelda series in general, it doesn't shy away from that either, because I think there are QTE like prompts in Twilight Princess and Wind Waker as well. Not like traditional QTE. Ryu from Shenmue is going to get hit by a soccer ball if you don't hit A in time. But what wasn't there like a B prompt that would pop up if you could do like a specific attack in Wind Waker?
Yeah, that's Wind Waker.
In
Maybe
Wind Waker,
far down the line for this
your A button,
game.
Your controller would vibrate, and your A button would have like a corona of light or whatever around it, so you could parry. And
that's right.
like single interactive prompts, I think are low profile enough that if they're used sparingly in a game, like. They really don't cause any sort of jarring experience. You're just like, oh, this gives me the context that I need in order to perform the action that both the game wants me to do and I ideally want to follow that prompt.
Yep. Well, if you guys are ready, I want to talk about the final sequence in this game.
The best part of the game.
In some ways, I think it might actually be a... It's a cool moment when you take on the setting, I guess.
I just like the kids waxing poetic and getting very philosophical with me before they make me do stupid fucking challenges like the Goron roll.
Do you have any friends? Hee hee. What the fuck does that mean? Why do you laugh at the end of that question? Those fucking kids are assholes.
These kids live on the moon. They were not socialized properly.
They had the 4 of each other or 5 of each other. One of them would have turned out all right.
So, as we're alluding to, when you confront these child versions of the masked salesman, were you calling him the happy masked salesman? Oh, no, sorry. That's for Macarena.
Wouldn't they be the happy mask sales boys since they're all young?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're
They're
just called the
children
Moon
wearing
Children.
masks, so it's very difficult to actually tell.
Yeah, so you said they're called the Moon Children,
Yeah,
right?
they're just called the Moon Children.
Which, I don't know. I really want to know why the hell... Well, we can speculate about that later, but after talking to each of these children, you continue to relinquish masks and do these challenges. The first one, the Deku Challenge, that one's easy. I feel like through the course of the game, you get a whole lot of practice flying around as a shrubbery and Like the only thing that threw me for a loop for a bit was the difference between the red and yellow flower on one of the spinning.
The second one.
Yeah, the spinning platter or whatever you want to call that, right? When you realize that one of them does not get you further, but the other one gets you far enough to actually get the heart piece and get you to the door.
You encounter yellow flowers later than the pink ones, but you definitely encounter it in Snowhead, it's Snowhead is that dungeon, and you also could potentially encounter it in a couple bonus or like non-plot areas in Woodfall.
Now,
he was not interested in non-plot areas.
Yeah, I didn't do shit for hearts this game. I did not explore all that much.
See, the funny thing is one of the reasons I love this game so much, and I won't derail this too much, is that actually all of the things outside of the bosses and the plot were what I really enjoyed for it.
I'm really curious about but we won't derail it, and I'll ask maybe outside the podcast.
Sounds good.
So the Goron challenge, as you allude to, is the dumbest thing I think I've come across.
And painfully difficult.
It's really easy in the 64 version, in my opinion.
Because the 64 version had that notched analog stick, so you could go perfect straight.
Yeah.
Because like the first portion of that is not bad. I actually mapped my keyboard out to be my analog stick. And I was able to make it through those right angle turns like perfectly at that point. I think my only issue with it is that like the game doesn't really necessarily illustrate that there's an easy way out of that obstacle, thin, narrow walkway. I also don't think that like the game ever forces you to get good at the Goron roll. I certainly am not good at the roll. And
I mean, you're just going off of ramps in almost any other use of it.
Yeah, exactly. And like the hardest thing that you actually are forced to go through is the lead up to the Snowhead Mountain.
Goron race?
The Goron race is like not that difficult in the aspect of your
fucking humble brag.
It's I'm not humble bragging it. It's literally less about getting good at driving a Goron, as I'm going to put it, and it's more about lucking out with the rubber banding mechanic. Because that's literally it.
It is the inspiration for the motorcycle races and Sleeping Dogs. I can say that much.
I feel like the best way to play that race is to be shitty at it, just shitty enough where you are going to be behind three people towards the end of the race, and then their rubber banding is going to pull them into a point where if you get top speed, you're just going to get past them. Because if you're winning that entire race, you're going to have three people try and derail you at the end.
I thought the best way to win it was to make sure like the last 5 seconds you are not hit, and then to hit the person who is right next to you so that they get pushed over and that you will be first. Because that's how you won it the last second. And that's how I won it.
That's how both of us won it? I think I just got extremely lucky given that particular situation.
Because remember I told you, hit that guy right next to you, and so you did, and you won.
Man, fuck rubber banding in race games. Like it's literally just the cheapest way to make a race interesting. Like it basically means that like the mechanics of the race are not good enough for the game to rely on a fair contest.
Yeah.
Well, so anyways, though, it's like I just feel like this whole narrow passageway Goron obstacle, it doesn't do a good job telling you what your actual objective is, because you can just do the cheap way out where you get past those right angles in one wide turn, get out of Goron form, and just walk to your destination. So if you don't know about that, you would probably end up spending an hour just trying to get through this really intricate obstacle course to get a heart piece, and then realize, oh shit, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do, and accidentally walk over an eye and get teleported back to the start. But enough of Goron racing. The third obstacle, I'm super curious about this because I had my own issues with it. Scott, do you know?
64 version's immensely easier. I'll tell you that. Immensely
It is
easier.
very easy.
So what makes it easier?
It's not like anything like the 3DS version.
It's like a completely different obstacle course?
Completely different.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have as hard a time as Tiffany did on the 3DS, but I was completely annoyed by the fact that it relied on the dolphin jump out of the water, which it sounds like was much easier to pull off in the 64 version.
I don't even think there is a dolphin jump. I'm pretty sure you just hit a ramp and you walk up the ramp.
Yep.
Like you bash your head against the ramp if you're still swimming fast, and if you slow down, then you just gently walk up it. But there isn't anything to jump on.
Well, and so with the 3DS version, the dolphin jump, which feels almost non-existent, if you miss that, you actually end up going underneath the platform.
And you have to restart.
And then the
Yes.
thing that almost all Zeldas love to do, waste your time and watch that cutscene of the gate opening every time.
It's just like, as a whole, this game never respects the player's time.
Well, and I assume because of the speed of swimming, you almost never utilize the dolphin jump. Like, it feels fun and natural in the N64 version because of the velocity that you have, but I can't think of a single reason why you would even discover it prior to that point.
Yeah, you have
in time,
no reason
really.
to. But before that.
Exactly. And the map layouts, like, there are hardly any points in the regular dungeons that would, unless you're doing maybe some like non-story or non-quest related content, you don't really get a whole lot of positions that allow you to go top speed and jump out of the water. It's like you always have to make turns and explore more. Like, you're in a dungeon, you need to make sure you're getting everything you can. So you usually stop swimming and get on the grounds of the water.
I'm
so
going
to
to
speak.
correct myself. There is an instance where you can dolphin jump during the beaver race, but I didn't. I fish flopped over that. I didn't dolphin jump because I kept fucking up doing it, so I just fish flopped my body on top of it.
Oh my god, fuck
So,
that beaver race. I
Yeah,
forgot
fuck
all
that
about
beaver
that.
race.
Hey guys, you know the best way to do the beaver race?
Not do it.
You don't do it because you don't need that fucking bottle.
You don't need that bottle. Yeah, that's the worst moment about that whole game. Honestly, I hate that beaver race so much.
Those characters are so out of place. Like, they're straight
They
out of a
make no
Banjo-Kazooie
sense. Yeah.
game.
And the fact that the rings have a pretty large area of collision is also bullshit for a game that does not handle as precise as those rings almost seem to necessitate.
I mean, at least on the 3DS version, if you hit 90 degrees to your left or right on the analog stick when you're swimming, Link basically will do a complete 180 degrees. I don't fucking understand sometimes how the swimming system works. Anywho, the last of the 4 hide and seek trials or obstacles
Is the Bomb Chew minigame.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of dumb, but I guess it's a throwback to some Ocarina of Time.
Well, so that's the thing. Tiffany was saying that apparently you can get bomb chews through the regular course of the game.
Yeah.
You can, but you never have a reason to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And I never found any. So when I get to them, I'm just like, I understand most people playing Majora's Mask played Ocarina of Time, but this is just like a symbol of what is flawed about these obstacles, or at least some of them, which is it has you doing things that you have not been prepared to do beforehand. Normally, some of these late game challenges or whatever to get the cool big sword or whatever feel rewarding when it's having you work upon the skills that you've developed through the course of the game.
Right. As opposed to pigeonholing something that is possible, but has no relevance until that very moment.
Exactly. Really, at the end of the day, I can't be that mad about it because this was not as annoying as the Zora or Goron challenge. But what can I say?
It's all worth it for that fierce deity mask.
We get that fierce deity mask, and we get to play the highlight. That is the last boss.
If you don't have the fierce deity mask.
I mean, is it great? I don't know, because it took me less than 2 minutes, maybe less than like a minute 20, to get through the last boss. Because holy crap, when you put that fierce deity mask on, you are just. It's like you're invincible Mario going through a level. Like you're just beating everything up. You're shooting rays at people. You look like a badass with blue, which, by the way, you could argue that this was the point in time where the Zelda team was like, wow,
Link looks good in blue.
Yeah, looks fucking great in blue. It's a boss in blue.
So I played this fight for the first time ever in my life as young Link, because I had not acquired the Fierce Deity mask, because I did not want to get the Mask of Truth from that like mansion of spiders. And so I was missing one mask necessary to trade for all the challenges. And I remember that fight being a long, grueling slog that was ultimately very rewarding. It took a long time to take down Majora's Mask. Majora Incarnate was not super difficult, but it certainly wasn't over in like one sword combo. And then Majora's Wrath was an excellent and like difficult and exhilarating fight. It was really overall great to like go through that gauntlet and those three different forms as young Link. And then coming back with the Fierce Deity's mask years later, after I had finally gotten the Mask of Truth on another file I played and completed all those tasks. And I wish I could say I had an easy of a time with the Goron trial as Tiffany did, but I bounced into those bottomless pits so many times doing that. I finally got the Fierce Deity's mask, and it is the same thing for the N64 as well, Neil. You just hit your sword attack button until the cutscenes trigger for the next evolution, and then you just do it again, and then you get the end game screen. Like, it is massively overpowered, and there's almost no balance to it whatsoever. Like, the Fierce Deity mask really does make you feel like you literally are a god destroying just some like lesser demon in your way.
And you haven't played or you haven't fought the boss without the mat or the Fierce Deity since you're a kid?
That's correct.
Okay. Because not to like bash on your memory, but I think it's really easy to nostalgia goggles. I didn't hate Majora's Mask when I was a kid. I don't have much memory of it when I was a kid. I didn't get to the boss when I was a kid though.
Yeah, I will say that if you're like 10 to 11 years old, it was just the right pacing for a fight, and I don't know how that stacks up now, which is too bad. But I do remember it being the type of fight where I went and got the unlimited magic meter from like the Romani Chateau milk in order to make it through the fight. So it took some planning and prep. It took my skills as a adequate video game player who had just reached double digits in age. Like I thought it was a pretty well designed fight. And then the Fierce Deity's mask just trivializes everything in that game. Every boss fight. When you'd fight Goat with the Fierce Deity's mask, you'd essentially trip him after one or two sword swings, and he'd be shredded before he could get back on his feet. Like, It feels like a reward that is most definitely earned, but you almost feel bad for utilizing it in any of the boss fights.
I was going to suggest that maybe we talk about a little more about the story, but I think we've probably covered most of my major points on that. The story is, I guess, in a way like its greatest strengths, but at the same time also a sign of the like.
Is it story its greatest strength?
I don't know. That's the thing. I'm like so lost on this now. I can't tell if it's
I think it's concepts and ideas and aesthetics
yes.
are its greatest strength.
But I think the story ties into that. The execution of the story is maybe not the best. But instead, maybe we should just talk about the ending, the ending itself, because I think that's maybe the best way for me to cap off my feelings about Majora's Mask. Agreed?
Sure.
At what level of ending do we want to talk about?
We can talk about the canon truth at the very end, but the ending sequence after you defeat Majora and all of its forms.
The moon gets scared and it flies away back into the sky.
More like evaporates into the sky.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see.
Now they don't have a moon anymore and their ocean just disappears.
Skull Kid is fine. I can't remember. I think the giants just walk away. They're like,
you mean
all
the
right,
giant noses?
this is fine. Yeah.
They seem to have a conversation with Skull Kid, and Skull Kid realizes that the nose dudes still like him, and they considered him a friend all this time, despite abandoning him.
Well,
Yeah.
he's like, so you guys are my friends, and then they walk away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Shit, man, you really know how to party. We'll see you next time. They disperse into their cardinal directions. Happy Mask Salesman is ecstatic that you took care of his problem for him.
He seems almost pleasantly surprised that there is no more evil within
Really?
Majora's Mask.
I would have almost taken that as kind of disappointed that there's no more evil. Because he's like, oh, so there's no more evil in this mask.
I don't know.
That
I
makes
get
it
I get
interesting.
the vibe that he is happy that you have somehow purged the evil from the mask, but I certainly would like to think of it from your perspective.
I think
The
it can go
Happy
either
Mask
way, though.
Salesman, I think, would definitely benefit from being this sort of like antagonist figure who's just a little crazy.
I mean, that's what makes this game appealing to me to some extent, is exactly what is the true nature of the Happy Mask Salesman.
Did he let himself get robbed? That would be like, did he set Skull Kid up? He just happens to be teasing this powerful mask in front of him.
The whole Moon Children sequence is not that of a Kokiri. What the hell are they called?
What?
Yeah, they're Kokiri.
Oh yeah, Kokiri. Because like Skull Kids are dead Kokiri, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they like get lost in the Lost Woods forever.
So if we were to have witnessed like Skull Kids' deep inner thoughts within the moon, would it not have been Kokiri wearing the masks? Instead, we see these quote-unquote moon or lunar children or whatever the fuck, which all happen to have a very similar haircut to the Happy Mask Salesman.
I'm pretty sure if you do
Yeah.
a model viewer, I think it is Happy Mask Salesman.
So what does that mean? We are essentially seeing memories of the Happy Mask Salesman that I'm assuming were collected from him wearing these masks at some point in time. I know, it's profound.
Oh, nope, they're faceless.
They're faceless on their models.
Yep.
They do have the hair color there.
I sure as hell feel like there is something that we will never know, because at this point the game's all but been written out of the canon.
Oh, here we go. I have a fucking quote from one of the lunar children as I was looking it up. There's a quote from one of them that says, "Masks, you have a lot. You too. Will you be a mask salesman?"
Yep.
So, yeah. I think that's kind of a smoking gun in that case, huh?
Like, yeah, that further establishes that these children are some sort of past incarnation of the Happy Mask Salesman, right?
Or they're at least aware of the Happy Mask
Yeah,
salesman.
or they're like
There's
shards
also-
of him, parts of him, parts of his psyche, something like that.
There's 4 of them, and then one that feels isolated and alone and wants to play with the other 4, which is a mirroring of the narrative between Skull Kid and the 4 giants. So it's like it could be this fractured representation of the people that the mask has come into contact with. I don't know. But there's both Happy Mask Salesman elements and Skull Kid elements.
And this is why I feel like the story isn't strong, because they don't focus on their strong characters.
Yeah, because we only get Happy Mask Salesman at the start of the game and at the end.
But what a scene when he's shaking you. I love it.
In the opening?
Yeah, his expressions are great too.
Yeah, and then we never see him.
And I really do enjoy the fact that they like don't really animate him. It makes him creepy. Like that does make him creepy in my opinion.
Yeah.
So really, yeah, I agree with you. It's really telling that they have such interesting characters, and yet they can't dedicate more than a combined 20 minutes on them, it seems like, throughout your entire game. Just the intro and the outro. And again, ignoring current canon, I would absolutely imagine that this person seems to play a much bigger role in everything. Like, maybe he would have been the one that orchestrated... because Skull Kid's wearing Majora's Mask at the start of the game, right? When he steals the ocarina. So it's very plausible to think that the mask salesman basically orchestrated Skull Kid stealing your ocarina in Hyrule and leading you to Termina.
I mean, maybe they realize that they fucked up with the story, and current canon just kind of like fixes what they fucked up with the story.
But that's the thing. Okay, so before we get into like the current canon thing,
you can't really rewrite the story, in my opinion.
Before we get to that, though, I just really want to quickly address another failing with the story, is that the ending of the game, you spend so much fucking time fixing this goddamn like alternate universe or dimension, and Link can't fucking go to the festival. Why?
We got a festival to Link, so you should get out of here.
Yeah, that's literally what they say. They're like, well, we got our own thing here. It's probably time for you to leave, right, Link? See you later, Link. But no, seriously, we want to spend time. Like, Chrono Trigger, a game that has infinitely done time travel better than
any
Majora's
other game
Mask.
with time travel.
Well, yeah, that too, probably. More than 3 or 4 years before Majora's Mask. I could be
At
wrong
least,
there.
Yeah.
Gives you the fucking ability to attend the Millennium Fair or Millennial Fair or whatever it is at the end of the game, and it's the best thing in the fucking world. Like, and just the existence of that particular scene and not having it here is such a fucking bummer. Like, I want to talk to Anju and Cafe and Romani and
I want to see their
Cremia.
fucking wedding, besides the little cutscene.
You don't even see Cafe's like full sprite. He literally
Can't make
is,
that model. Too much time.
Yeah, we couldn't just increase his body size.
His height, yeah. And the gap on that is 5 years. Chrono Trigger was 1995, and I knew that 1999 was Ocarina of Time, so Majora's Mask.
I thought 1998.
Oh, maybe.
Could be in Japan.
Okay. Yeah. So it's 2000 for the release date of the first Majora's Mask. It's a good gap of time to not come up with, like, to not improve upon something like that.
I mean, I realize, like, doing it to the scope of Chrono Trigger is probably impossible with the amount of memory that or space that they had to dedicate to sprites, music, and everything else, and the 3 different instruments and their animations, which are all garbage
But
sounding.
does that mean, like, a story? How does that really affect your memory and everything?
No,
You're writing a story doesn't affect that. You can, like, write your story and then do that stuff.
Well, right, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that, like, if they were trying to build a time travel mechanic, that's not going to be as good as Chrono Trigger. Like, Chrono Trigger's time travel mechanic, like, the way they implement time travel is just, at this point, unparalleled, because they, and easily
they
when you
burn you with the consequences of time travel within the first tenth of the game, which makes you very cognizant of time travel and its impacts for
Yeah,
the
that's
rest
something
of
this
it.
game doesn't do. Is it doesn't make you feel bad for time traveling. I mean, I don't feel bad for not going back and saving the people ever, really.
I mean, they never. I don't know. It just never.
There's
there
no
never
consequences,
feels
yeah.
like there's consequence of any of your actions. And you're right. That's like one of the things. I think that's a thing in Radiant History, for instance.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Historia.
Historia. Thank you. And I'm assuming because I've never played it and never heard anything, but my assumption
It is
by the
definitely
fact that you have to replay chapters and replay parts of the past are because if you do something, you probably fuck something else up along the way. So it adds replayability, which in a game that is all about playing the same 3 fucking days in a row, it would have been nice if you could do the wrong thing, face the consequences, and redo it.
Like, I don't feel shit when that woman gets her bomb stolen. Sucks to be you.
But yeah, the current canon standing as it is now, the idea is that Skull Kid has basically created this world through his own dreams, and that when Link leaves Termina, I don't know how to emphasize which syllable, whatever, it basically destroys, or not destroys, but the world ceases to exist. That feels like the ultimate cop-out to me, and if anything, it makes me feel like the people coming up with the official timeline and history of Zelda don't give a shit about Majora's Mask.
Scott, you mentioned before, like, they couldn't do exactly what they wanted, and write the story of what they wanted without, like,
without having to make sacrifices,
Yeah.
or essentially, like, they've got to mold the story to fit the mechanic that they want to utilize, and that's something that
I feel like. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
you first.
I just feel like this is them trying to cover up all their like plot holes and all the things that they feel like they fucked up with that, like what Scott was saying with that. Like this is just like them just trying to quietly cover that up.
I mean, it's an effective move in the sense that if you say, "Ha, it was all a dream,"
I mean, yeah,
you really
that's what
don't
they're
have
trying
to take
do.
any responsibility for things that don't make sense or don't work.
But I feel like we're not giving them enough credit. It's not like they're idiots there. And let me elaborate, I guess. Let's first say that in multiple interviews, they've kind of said that they have basically started letting the fans kind of dictate a lot about where games sit within the timeline. Like they've taken feedback and then started to this is before like the Hyrule Historia came out,
Right.
Which started a lot of the consolidation of their timelines. But they in these interviews have stated that they consider player feedback and listen a lot to that as a basis of the creation of these timelines. So
go ahead.
So with that in mind, they also are able to construct good at times, great at others narratives, like individual narratives. Is it that crazy to think that you could envision a canon in which Majora's Mask takes place in something of an alternate dimension or world,
but has consequence or like retains the outcome versus being wiped off the slate?
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe it is all within Skull Kid's imagination. But like even writing in essentially that the world ceases to exist when Link leaves is it just makes all of the things, all of the struggles I went through have absolutely no bearing or hold within the quote unquote official universe. You could,
I'm gonna pitch real quick. Link's Awakening. Another game in which essentially the actions you're taking, I guess, save you from a coma at sea, but that's it.
Well,
like that's the consequence of that game.
I mean, you could argue that if you
just
actually
justified
died
that dream, then saved you from your dream, saved you from a coma. You just justified that dream.
But you
that
could
is
argue,
fair. I did justify that better.
You could argue that like if that were not the canon ending, and instead the canon ending is when you get killed by the last boss, you wake up on the wreckage as well. Like, I guess I'm just saying that, like, yes, you're absolutely right. That holds no fucking bearing to anything, and everything within Link's Awakening doesn't matter. But there's that interesting little bit at the end where it shows a seagull fly by, and the whole thing with it's Marin in that game, right? Not Malin.
I believe so.
But Marin talks
Yeah.
about wanting to, be free. Like, there could be a little hocus pocus going on there. Just like how there could be a little hocus pocus going on here. Like, how do you explain having the butler Deku outside of the Termina tree stump magic hole thing?
That's true.
Mourning his son. Like, that's obviously basically just has to be forgotten or ignored if you want the entire Dream Skull Kid sequence thing to be canon.
Wait, outside of the Termina tree stump? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, so you get the ocarina stolen at the beginning of the game, then you have to jump on all those stupid logs, doing your backflips and cartwheel jumps. Man,
That
holy
cool
shit.
shit. Yeah.
Dude, it was so fucking good. I'm glad we have the expansion RAM for this. And then you get into the tree, and then you fall down, and then you die, and everyone
this weird
talks about
portal,
Link being
yeah.
dead, right? But so the tree is actually outside of Termina.
Oh, that is before you fall, isn't
Yep,
it?
so-
Okay. I thought
so-
that was after.
That, like, I mean, if we're ignoring their whole canon thing, which I'm at this point, I kind of feel like their Historia doesn't really matter. It's cool to think about. I do like constructing all these games in a way that makes sense within some ridiculous complex web. But if we take that for what it's worth, it seems to indicate that the two worlds exist separately from each other but have a connection. Maybe if you wanted to, like, make a compromise between what has been said and like what the game presents, maybe Skull Kid was that connection, and when Link leaves Termina, the connection gets severed, but the two worlds exist separately.
I mean, what point does the dream start and end?
You mean from the stand? Are you asking, like, did the world get created when Link fell in?
Yeah, was it even before that? Was it dream?
I mean, that's the question. If you believe the idea behind the Skull Kid dream, there has to be a start to it. But what I'm prone to believe is a more faithful explanation for Majora's Mask is that the worlds have always existed. Or, I mean, like, Termina has existed as long as, or within the same time frame as Hyrule has existed. So it's never been a question of when Termina began to exist. It's always been. Why, you may ask, there are characters that look the exact same as characters within Hyrule. That's just cheap assets. No, I mean, that's the whole idea behind, like, alternate dimensions, right? Or, like, multiple timelines and whatnot. Perhaps Termina is a different timeline or dimension that has, like, deviated so far back that literally, like, the shape of the world itself is different. I don't know.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I feel like that's on par with Link is Dead theory.
You mean the alternate dimension thing?
The thing where,
Yeah.
like, it's on par with Hyrule, different...
Oh, like Termina existing as long as Hyrule has and so forth. I mean, I don't think it's that far-fetched to imagine something like that could be the case. The difference here is that, like, the Link is Dead theory is just outright wrong.
So at what
Whereas-
point did the Ocarina of Time Link diverge so far that he became Majora's Mask Link?
I don't think... I think he's the same. It's the same Link.
It is, but how did it become into this timeline where it's so fucked up that this Termina became...
Oh, no. So my theory, again, like, if we don't want to follow the whole canon, like the whole retcon, is that he literally transports to a different dimension. The new theory about it all being a dream can make sense, but it also just... I don't want to... It's not like a question of whether or not I believe it, but it's just I would choose not to allow that to be like the reality of it, because it makes me feel like I just wasted my time with Majora's Mask, like more so than Link's Awakening. I not to say I thought Link's Awakening was a waste of time, but
Link's Awakening was a better.
I'm sorry, I've been doing some investigative journalism while this discussion has been going on, and I think I have something to add to our concept of, like, I guess permanence, or I'd say permanence of this fever dream that happens that is Majora's Mask. And apparently there is an ending at the end of the 3DS version in which there is a Skull Kid style, like, etched drawing onto a tree stump that is outside of essentially the tree that you fall into to access Termina, showing Link, Skull Kid, the two fairies, and then the four giants.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Is that not an acknowledgement of the actual events taking place and, like, having permanence in the, like, overarching world?
Well, according to the retcon, like, that still can happen. It's just that Skull Kid, that's fucking Skull Kid's imagination. So once you get done dicking around in Skull Kid's dreams, you get out of Skull Kid's dream. Skull Kid's dream ends, and
Skull Kid goes and draws that.
yeah.
So, like, I had a good dream today.
Okay.
But like, it's still like my whole issue with this retcon is that it doesn't make any fucking sense as to what the hell Majora's Mask is at the start of this game. Like, what is he wearing then? If Majora's Mask does not originate from Termina, or it doesn't even have to necessarily. All we know is that, like, there is a mask that he is wearing at the start of the game that he is not wearing at the end of the game.
You mean Skull Kid?
Yeah, because Skull Kid has the the Mask of Majora, I should say, rather, when he steals the ocarina from Link.
Yeah, it's Majora's Mask. He had already stolen it.
Right, exactly. But he doesn't have it by the end. So what I'm insinuating is, it's kind of like the idea of, I exist, I think, therefore I am. Like, the mask is there, therefore it exists. So if it's all just a dream, like, is the mask just a thing he had and he decided to play a prank? Then you somehow get involved in his dream by falling into a tree, and then you fix the dream and you leave the dream. Does he still have the mask there? Like, there's just...
Why are you assuming these are real items? This is a fucking dream.
But the start of the game is not a dream.
How do you know that? Like I said, how do we know when the dream starts?
That's a good point. Like, the entire fucking game is a dream. Therefore, anything like the Deku Scrub body or corpse...
Still viable.
It doesn't matter.
Dream
it's all
definition.
a fucking dream.
I mean, that forest area looks pretty suspect. Fog everywhere.
I mean, really, it even draws into question... Like, so if we were going to assume that everything in this game is a dream...
That's why Link does those fucking extra ass jumps.
Like, Link is never an acrobat. He is not part of the flying circus.
I think we've solved that they're in the Lost Forest, or the Lost Woods. They accidentally consume one of those mushrooms you're supposed to bring to the lady for, like, a blue potion. And we get Majora's Mask out of it. When they come to, they've had this great, friendship adventure together, leaning against this stump, sharing stories.
Oh, so you're thinking it's a combined dream between Link and Skull Kid?
I mean, I am really... I'm out of options at this point on what makes sense. Unfortunately, this has gone from being a game that I have really fun memories to something now that I can't stop thinking very critically about tearing to shreds.
I'm glad.
As a whole, I give this game like 1 out of 2. I don't even know.
I mean, it's not like Zelda CDI, but it's a stain on the Zelda name.
I haven't played...
It's the weakest Zelda's Link, in my opinion.
Like, it's definitely the worst Zelda game I've played. And it's crazy to think that, especially with all the...
Okay, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I haven't completed Spirit Tracks, but from what I have played, they're comparable.
It's definitely the worst Zelda game for me, but does that make it a bad game? I don't know. At times, I don't think I had fun playing Majora's Mask, but I think the majority of the time I had some fun playing it.
Sounds like a 3 out of 5 to me.
It has fun concepts. Like its entire concept is fun. It has good aesthetic, has good ideas. Like it doesn't have that Nintendo polish.
Guys, thanks for listening. If you think we're wrong about Majora's Mask, you can write in at podcast@fancyramen.com.
Fucking suck it if you think we're wrong.
That's right. Record your own 2-hour rebuttal and send it our way.
Or better yet, if you're going to write in, please don't just say something like, the gameplay is great. It's an improvement.
The bosses are fun and the idea is cool. The time mechanic is good.
Send it to tiffany@gmail.com.
I would love for people to tell me why I'm wrong, but I want to hear actual reasons and arguments and not just, it's a beautiful reuse of assets from Ocarina of Time.
I'm glad you're actually using those things that I read Sorry, could you not hear this? I'm glad you're actually using those arguments that I read from legit articles.
Only the best reviews for Majora's Mask.